In February 2024, Sheldon Johnson was a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast where he spoke openly about turning his life around. Johnson was a former member of the Bloods gang who spent 25 years in prison for attempted murder, per NBC New York. Video of Johnson on the podcast shows him wearing a shirt with the words Queen's Defenders on it. According to their website, the organization is comprised of lawyers and social workers committed to helping people in trouble understand their legal rights. Fans of the program were shocked to learn that Johnson was accused of the chilling crime. Johnson, 48, appeared on the show to talk about his criminal past, which included robbing someone at gunpoint and assaulting them to steal their jewelry. "A lot of red flags were going off in my head when I listened to that episode," wrote one person on Reddit, where users were discussing the arrest. Johnson's lawyer, Josh Dubin, called his client a miracle, adding that he was unfairly sentenced to 2 decades for a robbery that left his victims with only 2 stitches. At one point in the interview, Johnson talks about the moment in prison he knew a change had to happen. He was just released from solitary confinement and was thinking about his wife and children. In particular, Johnson was concerned about his son hearing stories about his criminal activities. In May 2023, Johnson was released from prison, and less than a year later, police found body parts in his freezer. Here's what we know about former Joe Rogan podcast guest, Sheldon Johnson. On March 6, 2024, police were called to an apartment in the Bronx when neighbors requested a wellness check for its resident. Neighbors reported hearing gunshots from the unit, as well as a man pleading for his life, per the New York Post. "Please don't," yelled the man desperately. "I have a family." Upon arriving, police spoke with the building's superintendent, who informed them that a stranger was seen coming and going from the apartment multiple times. In video footage obtained by the Post, the man in question is seen bringing cleaning supplies into the unit. At around 2 a.m., he carries in a large blue bin that he never brings back out. The video also saw the suspicious man driving the tenant's blue Audi, but he returned via an Uber, and this time he was wearing a blonde wig. Sheldon Johnson's father was stunned by his son's arrest. Johnson's father said he was shocked by his son's arrest. "I thought he did well in prison. He studied. I was happy he got out of jail. I thought he was reformed," Johnson Sr. told the outlet. He was assured by his son that everything was going well in his life, which is why Johnson Sr. couldn't believe Johnson would throw it all away. During Joe Rogan's podcast, Johnson discussed the fact that his father was incarcerated when he was a young boy. "I'm also a product of intergenerational incarceration," he shared with Rogan. Apart from his father, Johnson's grandfather was incarcerated and his great-grandfather was enslaved. Johnson's father told the Daily News that he wasn't around much when his son was growing up, but he believed he was a good kid. The victim in this week's slaying, identified as 44-year-old Colin Small, may have had a beef with Johnson while both were doing time at Sing Sing Prison in Westchester County. Neighbors told cops the victim was heard desperately pleading with his killer shortly before 2 shots rang out in the apartment near Ogden Avenue and West 162nd Street shortly after 8 p.m. Tuesday, sources and neighbors said. "Please don't," the doomed man was heard saying. "I have a family." Investigators were first called to the building for a wellness check after the shots were heard, and neighbors reported seeing a stranger coming and going from the apartment with cleaning supplies, the building superintendent said.
Gun charge that triggered the felony that it allowed them to be able to sentence me the way that they did in 1994. I also caught another case. At that time, I was what you call giving out consignment on drugs. 2 people in particular I gave consignment to, and I ended up getting arrested for a case. And when I sent someone to go pick up the money from them, they kind of just was like, whatever, I'm not paying them. So when I came home, one guy in particular, I ran into him with his girlfriend.
Did you get that case got dismissed, right?
The gun charge?
No, the one that you were away for. You got arrested for something. You're in jail.
Yes.
These guys figure since you're in jail, fuck it, we're not going to pay him.
Yeah, I'm not going to pay him.
And then the case that you were arrested for got dismissed.
Got dismissed.
Right,
I got
so
acquitted.
So then you come home.
So then I come home and, you know, I need my money. I need my money. It's just me being honest. It's just me being straight. You know, I gave you something, and we had an understanding that you were going to pay me. And when I came home, when I finally located this particular individual, he had his girlfriend with him. And this guy owed me $5,000 for some drugs that I gave him on consignment. I gave him an eighth of a kilo, which is 125 grams of cocaine. And when I saw him, he had a bunch of jewelry on. He was with his girlfriend. She had a bunch of jewelry on. And I said, hey, man, where's my money at? Oh, yo, I was going to pay you. As far as I was concerned, his jewelry we was even. So I robbed him. And I took his jewelry. And his girlfriend happened to be there. And unfortunately, she got caught up in the situation. I had a bunch of young guys with me, and they robbed her as well. And he got hit in the head with the gun right here on the side of his head, and he got 2 stitches. And they gave me 25 years for that case.
Did you hit him in the head?
No. One of the guys that I was with hit him in the head. And he identified me in a photo array, unbeknownst to me. He identified me in a photo array. This guy, you know, as far as I was concerned, he was in the streets just like I was. So
right.
I didn't really understand that, you know, like I said, we go back to morals and values and principles and how warped they can be, right? In my mind at the time, this is a guy who I gave something to. He's living an illegal life. I'm living an illegal life. So as far as I was concerned at that time, it was fair game. In hindsight, as I moved on and I became more mature and I began to reevaluate myself, I realized how wrong that was. But that was later on. At this time, I committed the crime and I just kept moving. Another guy that I ran into, he also owed me some money. He owed me $7,000, and it kind of went along the same ways. He was selling drugs out of an auto parts store. He was a Spanish guy. I got word that this is where he was at, and he was selling drugs, and I was going to get my money. And the same circumstances kind of ensued. Saw him, hey, what's going on? You know, reading in between the lines and outside the margins without really going into all of the details, I robbed him because he owed me $7,000.
Did he get physically hurt?
No, he didn't get touched. Got roughed up a little bit, but there was no physical harm, nothing.
I said, listen, I want to do a welfare check on a tenant because the person who is coming in and out is not the tenant. The super, who asked not to be identified, told the Post on Wednesday. He said Johnson carried a blue bin into the apartment at 2 a.m. and never brought it back out. He brought in the bin. I told them, why is he bringing in the bin at 2 o'clock in the morning? He's bringing in a bin so late, the super said. We tried to see if he took out the bin. He never took out the bin. I told them, look for a bin. And sure enough, it was there. The super also saw the suspect leaving in the victim's blue Audi and returning in an Uber wearing a blonde wig. He is coming in, he is dressing differently, changing his character, he said. I said, that's not normal, he is hiding something. He said police made an initial check on the apartment but left without busting the suspect. The guy stood there, the super said. They took him out and everything. They looked in the apartment, but they didn't find anything. They apologized, said somebody called, and they have to come. He said Johnson then asked to speak with him. I went back to the house and a neighbor called and said the guy is looking for me, he wants to talk to me, he said. I said, I'm gonna go to him, I'm gonna ask him what he wants, then tell the police what he tells me. That was the plan. But before the meeting took place, police were back and took Johnson in for questioning. Police officer in apartment hallway. If I'd gone, you never know what he was going to do, the super said. He was gonna frame me or shoot me or offer me something to get rid of the cameras or something. Tenant Jose Marquez told the Post he saw Johnson walking a small dog days before the murder. "It feels like the devil just crawled through here last night," Marquez said. The neighbor described him as quiet and a loner. "Sometimes we get fooled with the appearance. Well dressed, he looks clean," Marquez said. "You are assuming this guy has a professional career, went to work, came back, walked the dog and continued with his personal life." Johnson started working as a client advocate at the public defender's office in Queens sometime after being released from prison in 2019 after serving 20 years for a series of armed robberies in 1999. In an interview on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, Johnson, who claimed he used to be a member of the Bloods gang, told host Josh Dubin he was arrested and sentenced to a maximum of 50 years for using a gun to rob several men who owed him money for drugs. However, some of Rogan's listeners said Johnson downplayed his actions. "Pistol whipping someone during a robbery is a split second from armed robbery and murder," wrote one person. "I didn't like this guest at all." Fans rushed to the episode on YouTube to share their shock, with hundreds of comments pouring in after the arrest. "Here we are 1 month later, he's arrested for murder," one viewer wrote. "Delete this episode," another person urged. Dubin, meanwhile, is a recurring guest on the podcast, but Redditors hoped the grim news would spell the end of his appearances. "Hopefully that's the end of Josh Dubin coming on the podcast," wrote one person. "Yikes, I find zero interest in Josh Dubin criminal justice reform type episodes," wrote another person. "You'd think somebody given a second chance would find a way to live life without murdering folks, but unsurprising."